Hi, it's Walls again. Welcome back to my booktube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about rereading books, which is something that I don't typically do. And if you know me, that's probably surprising considering I rewatch TV shows and my favorite movies like it's my job. And I also love baseball, which is basically the same thing over and over and over again. So I don't know. I just don't reread a whole lot of books. So I have some books I'm going to share with you today, the ones that I do reread. And I don't know, maybe some of them will interest you and you'll be wanting to read them by the time this video is over. The first one I'm going to start with is Just Kids by Patti Smith. I got this in the mail a few years ago, and it actually took me a while to open it for the first time because I knew who Patti Smith was. I just didn't know her well, and I wasn't a huge fan, not for any particular reason, just because I just didn't know enough about her. And now she's one of my favorite people. This is a signed copy of the book, and nobody gets to take it anywhere. It's mine. I love her. If I could stalk her, I would. I mean, I know we're on YouTube. I wouldn't stalk her. I just would want to see her in person. I would totally stalk her. This book is a lot about the 1970s in New York City, the art scene, the music scene, the writing scene. Fascinating for people who love that kind of stuff. Really, it's one of those books that you could just go down a million rabbit holes with. I've mentioned before that I happen to be a rabbit hole person, so this book sent me on a lot of rabbit holes. I was watching movies, I was going to websites, I was visiting people's graves, which sounds really weird. One of the people mentioned in here is Edie Sedgwick, who happens to be buried like around the corner from my house, like literally almost around the corner from my house. So I went down a huge rabbit hole with her, watched Factory Girl, have gotten her biography and learned a lot about her family, which is really interesting too. She was a really big part of the Factory, which was Andy Warhol's place that he made art and movies and whatnot. And anyway, this is not about Edie Sedgwick, but however, as you can see, you can go down a lot of rabbit holes because the people that were mentioned were incredibly important to the culture of the 1970s and influenced even our culture of today. They lived, she and Robert Mapplethorpe, who is the person in this picture with her, and this is kind of their story together. She talks about they were just kids. They were in their early 20s in New York. They lived at the Chelsea Hotel, which is a very famous hotel. You can look that up on Wikipedia and you will see there is a lot of history there. And that is a big portion of this book as well. So anyway, if you're interested in any of that kind of stuff, this is the book for you. The next one that I'm going to mention is The Elegance of the Hedgehog, and I did mention this in my French video, the Paris video, that was the last video I made, but only briefly. This one is more contemporary. It actually was translated from French into English, and it's actually a book that is about basically how life doesn't have to be extremely exciting. Most people's lives aren't incredibly exciting all the time, but even a normal everyday existence can be rewarding and rich, and the relationships that we make with each other can be rewarding and rich regardless of how exciting or how important the people involved are. It's about a concierge in a fancy French Parisian apartment building and a little girl who she makes friends with. But there's nothing, it's not saccharine, it's not cheesy. I'm just saying it's not this like sweet relationship between this old lady and this little girl. It's actually a really interesting, thought-provoking novel. I have listened to it twice. I own the audiobook and I read it once, so I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorites. It's very good. The next one is possibly my most favorite book ever, though. It's 84 Charing Cross Road. It's an epistolary novel, which means it's letters back and forth. It's very thin, as you can see, really short, easy read. And it is the book about letters between Helene Hanff, who's the author, and Frank Noel, I think, who was a bookshop worker in London. This took place a long time ago. They exchanged letters about books, and she would order books from him, and it's just incredibly charming and sweet. And this one, for anybody who loves books, this is a must. Read it. It really will take hardly any of your time. Read it, and then you'll want to read it again, I promise. There was a movie, actually, 1980s, I think, that was Anne Bancroft and Anthony Hopkins. Judi Dench is in it as well. It's really good, but the book is better. Then I've got Pride and Prejudice, and this was actually, I know, Pride and Prejudice seems like, of course, some girl would have Pride and Prejudice on her list of books that she's read over and over again. But I do. I just really like this one by Jane Austen. It was my first Jane Austen. I listened to it originally, and I was so surprised by how easy it was to get into. Sometimes classics can be a little bit intimidating, and this one really wasn't. I mean, it's funny. It made me laugh. There were some scenes that really resonated with me, and I loved it. And then I ended up reading it for like a book club, and then I think I read it once more on my own just for fun. So it's a fantastic one. If you're looking for a place to start in classics or looking for a place to start with Jane Austen, I would recommend it. And this is another classic, Little Women. I've read this one so many times, probably the book I've read the most, and this is one that I read over and over as a kid even. Most of you probably know the premise of Little Women. There's been like 10 movies or something made on this book. And I loved Jo March, who is the one that is based off of Louisa May Alcott's character. This is not a true story, but it's based off of true people. It's based off of Louisa May Alcott's actual family. And she was kind of the tomboy, the book nerd, and so there were parts that I could definitely relate to with her, but her other sisters, obviously, like each of them have a very distinct personality, and I can still remember as a kid which one I really, really wanted to be, and now as an adult, which one I would rather be. And there is, their house is actually in Massachusetts. I went there with a friend once. We were in Boston for something else. We decided to drive out and see the house, and we made it to the very last tour. Like, they basically let us in even though they weren't supposed to, and we were not allowed to touch anything. But if you know me at all, and like I've mentioned before, I'm a major history geek. Like, I want to be in the exact spot that something happened. I want to know that so-and-so's feet were right here, and this is where it happened, and this is exactly what happened, so give me all the details, and I love it. And we went into her room, Louisa May Alcott's room in the house, and her desk that she wrote Little Women at is still there. And on her bed was a quilt made by her mom, who's called Marmee in the book and the movies and whatever. And she's one of my favorite characters. In real life, she was a fascinating woman. She was a suffragist. Their families were abolitionists. They hid slaves that were trying to escape into the North. Really, really interesting stuff. I mean, they were friends with Thoreau and Emerson and Hawthorne and some really interesting people of the day. So getting just some factual background about them, even if you're not interested in Little Women, is kind of fun. But we were not allowed to touch anything, so I accidentally fell into her bed so that I could touch the quilt that her mother made for her, and then again I kind of tripped and had to glaze my hand over the desk that she wrote Little Women on because I didn't want to fall flat on my face, of course. So again, this weird compulsive thing I have about being exactly where the person was and touching their things, and now I have outed myself, so they probably won't let me back to Concord House. And then another thing that I've read over and over again, which I guess isn't so unusual, are these poems by Edna St. Vincent Millay, which is her early poems. She has several books of poems that had been published, and then she also has a complete collected work of poems. But I really love Edna St. Vincent Millay. She and Dorothy Parker are probably two of my favorite female poets, and they're probably two of my favorite poets, bar none. They're very different. Obviously, Dorothy Parker is, you know, tongue-in-cheek, very witty. Edna St. Vincent Millay is more serious for sure. But this one in particular, I have so many earmarks in this book. Some of these poems have meant so much to me, and they've just been so perfect for certain times that I've read them. And she just absolutely 100% one of my favorites. So I highly recommend this one as well. So which books have you read over and over again, and why, and should we read them? Let me know below, and I will again put the authors and the titles down below in a list. Thanks for watching. See you next time.